Hi, and welcome to the Debrief. This is Carolina Journal's weekly recap of everything happening in public policy and politics. I'm Donna King. I'm editor-in-chief of the Carolina Journal. You can see everything we are talking about here each week at carolinajournal.com, so make sure you head over there. This week we have David Larson, opinion editor of Carolina Journal. Lots of good stuff coming from him each week. And David Bass, talking about education coverage for North Carolina and for Carolina Journal. And deputy editor-in-chief, we have Jeff Moore. He's going to be talking a little bit about what you can expect from your ballot this November. So this week we've got Vice President Kamala Harris is coming to North Carolina. This is the second time in as many weeks that she's back, and we're going to see a lot more of them, no doubt, throughout 2024. And also we've got a new name on your ballot coming up in November. We'll talk about that too. And state lawmakers are looking to roll up some entitlement programs. What does that mean for people who are on these programs, and what does that mean for taxpayers? We're going to really dig in to that. And DEI on campus. Wondering if it's important to you. We're going to be polling that soon coming up, but really we want to see what's happening on North Carolina's college campuses in DEI. First, though, before we get to all of that, North Carolina's legal community really had a loss this week. The death of Thomas Farr, a consummate defender of North Carolina's voter ID laws and certainly of North Carolina's congressional maps. He really was a prominent figure in those cases and nominated 4 times to be a federal judge, not once. You have to have a major resume to be nominated not just once, but 4 times. Certainly he will be missed. All right, let's get going first with Kamala Harris here in town, again here for North Carolina. Jeff, tell me a little bit about what's coming.
Yeah, so she is in Charlotte again this week after her and President Biden were in Raleigh last week. So she's there talking about environmental justice and climate change. The NCGA had a nice little troll kind of job that they put out yesterday saying that she was actually coming to Charlotte to talk about an illegal alien on the terrorist watch list that was residing here in North Carolina and got picked up, and they said, just kidding, she's here to talk about climate alarmism. North Carolina is going to be a popular destination for the presidential candidates and the administration. Obviously, you're going to have Trump through the state a lot. Last week, when Biden and Harris were together in Raleigh, one of the most prominent Democratic strategists that's running their Biden for NCGA operations noted that they raised about $2.3 million at a fundraiser that Governor Cooper. Yeah, he said it was probably the largest single fundraiser that they've had as in the state of North Carolina politically. So. It is interesting, though, latest polling shows that Biden is more underwater here in North Carolina among the 6 or 7 swing states that they were polling than those other states. So this may be an effort to kind of buoy the base. They're heading to areas that are certainly blue and reliably voting blue. In Mecklenburg County, you're going to have support for Biden there. So maybe that's an effort there. And maybe Governor Cooper actually just plays to be a good host for Biden and delivery of the messaging that they want, because these things get picked up beyond just North Carolina, but regionally as well, and they spread those messages. So you're going to have a lot of attention, and we're seeing that follow through this year, and it should just pick up as we work towards election. Yeah, sure. So what do you think? A lot of money coming in from North Carolina. Maybe that, sort of high-level Democrats with deep pockets don't know where to put their money, I guess. I mean, they'll find a way, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think that looks good for Biden here. Is there's a lot of people with a lot of money that are willing to have a fundraiser for him, and he can come over with a big take. But looking at the polling, it doesn't seem like North Carolina is a very favorable place for them at the moment. And I did think when we polled what issues voters are interested in right now, as Matt Mercer at NCGA said, why not talk about immigration? He probably chose that issue because that's the ones that voters are saying is their top issue. What Kamala Harris was talking about was climate, which was 5% of voters or something like that. It was very low. That's their top issue. So I think, they might be able to come and get some money, but it's going to be difficult for them if they're not going to address the issues. If they're that far behind and they're not going to talk about those top issues. And also, even with the base, they're seeing some issues there. Like I think at Biden's speech, he got kind of trolled by some members of the base and think he's being too pro-Israel, and so there's even a little difficulty there. So I think there's a lot of problems from as a battleground state. We're kind of a lean red one, and if it's 6 points back, it'll be interesting to see if they keep coming here or if they're going to try to focus on ones where it is a bit closer.
Sure. Well, and first, from a strategy standpoint, it seems to sort of make sense if money turns elections, and you're coming here, talk about environmental justice because you're preaching to the choir. You're not really looking for votes, but dollars. Right? So, I mean, it is interesting. We're seeing them so much in North Carolina. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to see how frequently they've both been here. And I think, obviously, one of the reasons is because, as we've talked about before, in 2020, the narrowest victory margin for Trump of any state was North Carolina. So that might be one reason why they're thinking about it. They're, they would love to pick up, obviously, those 16 electoral votes. The last time North Carolina in recent history went for a Democrat was Obama in 2008, and even then it was a very narrow margin. So it's a very competitive state. Obviously they're targeting it. It's very important for their plan, electoral plan. But I was just disappointed that Kamala didn't say anything about big yellow school buses.
Here's the thing. Who doesn't love a yellow school bus, right? Can you raise your hand if you love a yellow school bus, right? There's something about and most of us, many of us went to school on the yellow school bus, right? And it's part of our experience.
That's the best thing, There's that clip of her where she just went on and on about the yellow school buses. It's kind of one of those things that's gone around. But yeah, they're here. They're going to be back. Obviously, it's going to be an interesting few months.
It's going to be a crazy year. What else are you watching in the presidential election?
We had some. The polling came from the Wall Street Journal just yesterday, the day before. That polled 7 of the swing states, and 600 voters each in these swing states, North Carolina included. And it showed that in 6 of the 7, you actually had Trump on top of Biden. And I think it was Wisconsin, which was the only one where Trump wasn't leading, and it was a tie. So that's interesting. If you rewind the tape back to 2020, I believe Biden's probably leading in most of these states in polling at these stages. But also because we have the question of who is going to be on these ballots, with RFK Jr. Seeking ballot access and earning ballot access here in North Carolina, but seeking ballot access in states across the country, as well as some other independent and third-party candidates. How is that going to shake out in the general election? Who is it going to help or hurt more? Trump as a candidate or Biden as a candidate. In that polling, they actually pulled out and they did head-to-head matchups. Then they did matchups with independent candidates, excluding RFK, and then a whole list of a hypothetical ballot including RFK. And it shows pretty clearly that RFK and those other third-party candidates are hurting Biden more than they're hurting Trump. It falls off a little bit of the averages of who they're supporting when you add those other candidates in there, but it's a marked fall off for Biden. So many of those candidates seem to be pulling from the Democratic Party and pulling votes away there. So I don't think that there's going to be any real threat to a Trump candidacy here in North Carolina with a 6-point lead. It looks like if you introduce those other candidates, it shrinks to 4 or 5 points, but nothing too big.
Yeah, explain a little bit about how he's getting on that ballot and he's requested. I don't know if they've approved it yet. I'm hearing maybe they haven't. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so instead of seeking a pure independent candidacy, I believe they went through a party called We the People Party to get the party registered and then have RFK Jr. on the ballot as that candidate, because it has a lower threshold for the required signatures that they would get on the petition. So they're able to get that. I don't think it's been approved yet, but they've submitted above and beyond the number that was required to have a certain buffer there for invalid signatures and everything like that to try and get on the ballot here. So it looks like in North Carolina he's got a pretty strong chance. About half a dozen other states where they're taking a similar approach. Unsure, it really doesn't look like he'll be on the ballot in the 50 states across the nation, but maybe just enough in some of these critical states that it could make a real difference. So that's why everyone's looking very closely at who this really pulls from more, from the Biden side or the Trump side of the ledger. In North Carolina, it's looking like it's pulling from the Biden side when you introduce those other candidates.
Sure. David Larson, what do you think about this, about RFK? We've talked a little bit about it around the office, and what do you think the appeal is?
Yeah, I think even for some people on both sides, he seems like he's kind of, you see the rise of the unaffiliated. He seems like maybe he appeals to a certain maybe the populist branch of the unaffiliated.
Okay.
And then there's another group that may be for the more establishment types or moderate types of the unaffiliated, maybe no labels.
Okay.
But both of them are people who aren't very happy with the two major parties. And I would have imagined actually RFK would be pulling more from the Trump people, the people that I know who are, like RFK, seem to be ones who are also sort of in the America First kind of crowd. But it turns out, he's pulling. I've seen different polls, but I think some of them it seems like he's hurting Biden more. So that's interesting. And to Jeff's point about if you make a party, if you get a party on first, then it's easier to get that threshold. The No Labels has also created a party that's been approved. And interestingly, last time the Green Party had a lot of trouble getting on. And an update from this week is that a federal judge decided that the Democrats, all of their lawsuits trying to keep the Green Party off North Carolina ballot from last time were not sufficient. They didn't have enough validity to them. So the Democratic Party is now being told they have to pay the Green Party's lawyer fees for all those cases. So Mark Elias and all that. Turns out not only did they lose those cases, but they have to pay the Green Party's legal fees.
Oh, interesting. At the national level or the state level?
I think it was the DSCC, right?
Okay,
I think it was the national Democrats have to pay.
The Green Party.
Because the Green Party was trying to get on, and the Democrats thought, like in this case where some of these third parties are hurting Biden, they're worried about that, I believe, for the Senate race more in that one. And so that's kind of an interesting, another angle there with just ballot access.
Sure. What do you think?
I just think it'll be interesting to see with RFK how many of the swing states he can get on the ballot in, because that's obviously where the margin of difference there could actually matter when it comes to his presence there for Trump or for Biden. So North Carolina is an example of that, but what other states might be in that mix too?
And his opposition to vaccines is one reason why he's pulling some of those more conservative voters, I think. But he's not. Is he conservative?
I'm not sure exactly what he is. He's an interesting mixture of a few different viewpoints, but he definitely pulls from both. But I think there are enough Democrats who are not thrilled with Biden. It's looking for an alternative.
That Kennedy name. I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You're going to have to be tapping into like baby boomers in that age group.
Yep.
Very interesting.
And he also has an environmentalist background. I think he spent a lot of his time in that. So there is also, interestingly, you said conservative, maybe anti-vaxxers. There's some of that. There's also sort of a granola, sort of that angle of environmentalists who don't trust big pharma. They don't want to put that kind of thing in their body, and so there's some of that too, where somebody like RFK from more environmentalist background is also anti-vaccine.
Very interesting. All right, what do you think?
We often talk about how the Democrats seem to be more unified. They will clear a field so that their candidate is there. We see that with Josh Stein in the gubernatorial race, where he had some opponents, but nothing serious. But this may show that with weakness at the top of the ticket, the Democrats' kind of cohesion is falling apart a little bit. A lot of these third-party candidacies that you put on here are actually people that are left of center. So they're fragmenting there. You have the Green Party with Jill Stein. You've got Cornel West. You have RFK, who you mentioned his past is really to the left with the environmentalism. And so you have some fragmentation there where it's kind of breaking up that block. Meanwhile, you have Trump coming in for getting the nomination.
But a brutal primary.
A brutal primary for that. But once that's over, now that cohesion starts to come together for the Republicans, while it's seeming to break apart for the Democrats because Biden's approval is just so low. So it's just an interesting dynamic. It usually doesn't play out that way. You can kind of see it in the opposite direction.
Very interesting. All right, we'll be following all of this as we move through the 2024 cycle, certainly. I'm actually going to go to you, David Bass, because we're talking about benefits cliff. I've heard this term. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's very interesting. This week, so a legislative oversight committee dealt with this issue here in North Carolina. And basically it's where, we're talking about safety net benefits like food stamps, housing allowances, things like that. And you have a case where, say you have a single mom with a couple kids, and by earning a small raise, say, 5 extra cents an hour or something like that, she actually overcomes the threshold for these benefits where she loses them all. So a small increase in wage results in this huge loss of benefits. And in a lot of these cases, she would have to, double her salary in order to really overcome those benefits. So what it does is it just kind of keeps people trapped in the safety net system when it really should be a way for them to escape, by earning more wages, but it actually punishes them. So this legislative study committee was looking at perhaps organizing a study committee to look at that issue and look at how those cliffs could be overcome here in North Carolina. Relatedly, they were also looking at something called the one-door policy, which is out of Utah. It's a way to consolidate welfare programs in a state to kind of streamline it, make it more efficient, and also integrate it in a little bit better into work requirements. So they were looking at both of those issues.
All right, we're going to be following that a lot. We're also talking about DEI on campus. We've heard a lot about this too, but feels like the pendulum is swinging back just a little bit. What do you think?
It does, yeah. This is kind of a sleeper issue that it's kind of a surprise, in an election year. We polled for immigration and some other topics, but then a lot of discussion on this. You had the Educate Act from Representative Greg Murphy.
Sure.
He was kind of responding to this thing from Duke University Medical School, where they're saying that the way they're getting their students and the way they're hiring their doctors there, their surgeons, is now more, they said they've put aside kind of a lot of old metrics and they're looking at holistic things like race and gender were mentioned.
Sure.
So, Dan Bishop, who's running for Attorney General, he was saying he's going to maybe look at stopping practices like that. And then the Educate Act is Representative Greg Murphy. He was saying at kind of a federal level, they're looking at not having funds for that kind of DEI, where you're considering race and gender and those kind of things. And then, there's also up at App State, they're having some, and also at UNC Charlotte. In both of those, there's kind of some conflicts between the campus administration and the student body, where some of the ways that things have been done with, they're having drag shows and Pride Week and all these things. At App State, they're like going to no longer call it that. They're going to call it Spring Fest. And at UNC Charlotte, they're saying we're not going to go along with what the student body government is saying on, divest from Israel. The administration there said we're not going to pick sides on controversial issues of the day.
Sure.
So it seems like some of these campuses are pushing back a little bit on their activist student body and faculty a little bit, maybe reacting to the broader climate on DEI, turning some of the people who hold their purse strings, maybe not happy with that. They pushed it too far. I mean, it's a big movement out of 2020 after George Floyd and all that, that really started to put a lot of this, the Black Lives Matter and all of that turned into these DEI offices that have almost a propaganda like, they have these trainings, they have certain, watch out for these kind of microaggressions, and they're kind of telling you the way to think on certain controversial topics of the day. And I think a lot of people, are just not really comfortable with that, especially at a college campus where people are supposed to be thinking for themselves and trying to figure out, what to think on various topics. So looks like, the pendulum's swinging against it, and it's interesting for like an election year that, some of these politicians are really, and Jim Blaine as well, who was at UNC, he's a Chapel Hill trustee, said that he believes that there's going to be something along the lines of what Florida's been doing on that, taking that out of college campuses. And our Brianna Kramer from Carolina Journal talked to some people at the legislature that seem to suggest that, yes, they're going to take a look at DEI on campuses during this upcoming short session.
All right, we'll be watching that. Anything from education, you cover a lot about it. DEI seems to be all over education.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if maybe we reached peak DEI in 2023 and there's a downtrend from here. I mean, there's a backlash against it. There's a trend up and a trend down now.
Interesting. Do you think it'll be an election issue?
I think it's kind of representative of the larger kind of like woke movement and the pushback against that. Last year, I think it was Kid Rock that shot up all the Bud Light cans when Bud Light was going through its issue. And you had the blowback from that and Bud Light scrambling to get back on messaging and launching all sorts of manly Americana ads for to kind of get that crowd back.
Grandpa's feeling a little frisky today. Let me say something to all you and be as clear and concise as possible.
So that may have been the pivot point, actually.
Really?
Kid Rock blowing up some Bud Light cans may have been the pivot on some of this stuff, and the tide's turning, and we're going to see more and more instances of people kind of pushing back against some of that activism.
Very interesting. All right. Well, thank you for joining us on the Debrief. We're going to be covering this every week coming back to you, but make sure you check out carolinajournal.com for all the latest news and opinion, great analysis, and see you next Thursday.